Good evening and welcome to Catholic Peekskill. I'm Father John Higgins, your host for this public access television show, and I'm so glad you can join us. In this program, we always try to bring you events that relate to our Catholic faith, especially in the city of Peekskill and its environs. We've brought to you guest interviewees who come from our community, whether involved directly in the church or indirectly. There's so many wonderful things going on in Catholic Peekskill, especially at Assumption Church. Now, for anyone who's Catholic, anyone who knows anything about Catholicism, they know at the very center of our faith and our religious experience is the Holy Mass, because there's nothing like it. It is, on earth, our participation in heavenly reality. And so for Catholics, one thing that's always very important is the reverent celebration of the liturgy of Holy Mass, our Sunday services, although we do it every day of the week. For Catholics, when we receive the body and blood of Christ, it's the holiest thing we can do, because at the Last Supper, when Jesus gathered his friends around, the 12 apostles, he gave them his own flesh as food for them. And he said, "Do this in memory of me." We do it in memory of him each and every day of our Catholic life, but it's especially done with greater solemnity on the Lord's Day. That's why in this most important event of our weekly life, which is our weekly encounter with the Lord, our Sunday Mass, we want it to be special. And one of the things that's always characterized Assumption Church in Peekskill is reverent and well-prepared liturgy. And part of that, of course, is the music. Assumption Church is known around for its wonderful music. And our guest this evening is Miss Donna Sticco, who is our choir director, although she does wear a number of different hats, as we'll find about more as we go along this evening. But she is responsible for our wonderful choir that sings at our 10 o'clock Sunday morning Mass, and she also is the cantor at the 12 noon Mass, and she joins us. In fact, the music that you heard as the introduction for our show tonight is from a group that she founded. It's called Musica Pro Domino, Music for the Lord. She founded it, directs it, and sings in it as well. And Donna, so we're so very happy to have you with us this evening.
It's a pleasure, Father.
Thanks for coming to Catholic Peekskill. Now, I know our parishioners might know a little bit about yourself, your background. Maybe you could just give us a brief introduction. Tell us where you're from. You're from northern Jersey, I think, right?
From northern Jersey. Grew up there and then lived there really until I think it was 1980. 81 I moved to New York.
And did you come from a musical family, musical background?
Not especially. Sang always as a child. I think had a good training in Catholic school. Mm-hmm. In high school, joined the Glee Club. At Seton Hall University, joined the Glee Club.
Okay.
And, community groups for singing. Always liked to sing.
But at some point, you must have gotten involved in an official way in liturgical music or singing at Mass. How did this happen?
That happened at the parish that I belonged to at the time. I was a young adult, still at university, and they needed someone to conduct a choir. So I was asked to step up to the plate and really had no particular training in that area and learned on the spot. And that was back in the 70s and have been doing it ever since.
Wow, you got the liturgical music bug somehow.
It was a gift.
Thanks be God. Now, you've also been involved very much in catechetical ministry.
Yes.
We'll come back to that briefly, but tell us a little bit how that happened. What involvement have you had in the catechetical ministry of the church?
Well, my bachelor's degree was in education, elementary education.
Okay.
And about 5 years into doing that, I wanted to go on for a master's, but I knew I didn't want to go on for a master's in education. And it came to my attention that there was a Pontifical Institute at St. John's University in Jamaica, Queens. So I went out there for a visit, and it was the beginning of a 3.5-year commitment to night school and summer school to study Catholic doctrine on the graduate level. And it was while I was doing that I met other people who were interested in music, and just for fun, we began to sing polyphony, just for fun. And that's how Musica Pro Domino started.
So it was more like a hobby that turned into a ministry?
Yes, yes.
And tell us a little bit about Musica Pro Domino.
Well, that started actually in the living room of a place where some of the students were residing. And from there, we realized that we liked what we were doing and we weren't too bad at it. There were 5 of us initially. And we one time even ended up singing in the gift shop at the Metropolitan Museum. And someone came over and said, "What is this that you're singing?" And we said, "It's Catholic music of the Renaissance," and they were enthralled. And from there we went on to make our services available for all sorts of things: first masses, weddings, confirmations, private ones, baptisms of adults, for instance, marriages. We sang for most of the married members of the group, and we did vespers, music for days of recollection, and it just goes on like that, just by word of mouth over a very long period of time.
And you just kept broadening your repertoire, honing
Yes.
your skills
Yes.
as a choir director.
Yes.
And so bring us now to Peekskill. I know you've been in Peekskill for about 3 years. First you came actually as a parishioner.
Yes.
And then when the opening came about, you stepped up. I got your resume. You were the right one for the job. We've been delighted, of course, ever since. Tell me what that experience was like when you first started.
Well, I think it started when you asked me to just kind of hit for a day of recollection.
That's right.
The day before Palm Sunday or something like this. And I think that turned out to be my interview.
I think you're right.
Because you asked me at that point, what did I play? And I said, oh, the radio, that's about it. But we came in and just sang music that you helped me select for the group that was on that retreat that day. And then about 2.5 months later, you called me and said, you won't believe this, but the position has just opened up. So I came over and we talked a bit, and I was so happy to take it.
I remember that when you'd first come on the choir, expressed to me how grateful they were to me for having you come to be our choir director. And now, I can even speak this past Sunday, the compliments that I got for the beautiful music this past Sunday. Now 3 years deep, you've obviously deepened the choir, honed their skills, and you do so much. I think the church in some way threw a special challenge, not Assumption Church in Peekskill, but the Universal Catholic Church threw you a little bit of a curveball in November of 2011, even though we had a lot of time of preparation with a new translation of the Roman Missal.
Right.
What challenges did that present to you as a choir director?
I think the hardest thing was to wade through all of the new musical offerings that were out there. And I did that for weeks. And the challenge was seeing that so much of the music that was being created really wasn't corresponding to what was actually being demanded by the Roman Missal. It still was a bit too secular, wasn't really addressing the points that were brought out at a workshop that we musicians attended last year in June, which was given by Monsignor Wadsworth, who is the chairman of ISIL, the International Committee on English in the Liturgy.
Okay.
And certain things were stressed in that workshop and in his literature. And so the challenge was to find music that really implemented the new reforms. And I think that we did it successfully.
I'd say so. In the course of, now it's only been at the time of our recording this, maybe 9-10 months out from the beginning of those changes, we've learned how many new masses? Four new masses?
We have 3, but I think one of the things that made it really easy for us to begin this implementation was the fact that at Assumption, even before I came, the parishioners had already heard and were singing the Roman Missal chants in Greek and Latin.
Okay.
And so this was not an innovation for us. We had a running start on what was being asked of us. So all we had to do was sing them in English. And then our general thrust was to find other really lovely, prayerful chant settings in English, which I think we did English and Spanish and Latin, which is a great asset for our parish.
Which is a very diverse parish linguistically
Right.
as well as culturally. Now, I know that the experts, suppose the quote-unquote experts in the time of this transition, had indicated that the Pope and the Church is encouraging a greater use of chant.
Yes.
First of all, is that true? And if so, why is that? What are they looking for?
First of all, this request to implement chant, it isn't new. It started with Pius X back in the early the first decade of the 20th century. And it was reiterated many, many times during the 20th century. Somehow, after the Second Vatican Council, in spite of even materials that were made available for church musicians to implement this, it didn't get done. And so now here comes the new Roman Missal asking once again. But I think probably one of the things that facilitated the change is, and you would know this better than I, when you look at the actual book, there is so much chant written right into the book, which I think makes it easier for the priests to begin the implementation and then for musicians to follow suit.
And one of the things you're noted for is to do a chant setting of the entrance antiphon and the communion antiphon.
Yes.
And I think that's very forward-looking and forward-thinking of
We
a way
were
to
doing
present
that
those.
before it was even asked for. And then one of the points that Monsignor Wadsworth made was that we should be singing the texts of the Mass. And specific reference was made to the entrance antiphon and the communion antiphon. There is also an offertory antiphon. And in the year or so that this Roman Missal has been in use, not quite a year, but the planning stages, there are materials out there on the internet to help musicians begin to sing these texts of the Mass and not just supplant them with hymns that are appropriate, but to actually sing them. You can use a hymn as well, but it's the desire of the Church in these new reforms, with so much more scripture in the Mass, to be singing the scriptural texts of the Mass, and these antiphons are scriptural.
Now, I know that Father Anderson, who was at Assumption Church for 4 wonderful years, he began a very small children's choir, in a sense, just precisely to implement what you're talking about. Teach them a little bit of chant, and maybe have them sing at various venues throughout the church's year. And then you took over the position as the choir director, and soon enough that fell into your lap. Tell us about your experience with the children's choir. What was that experience been like?
It has grown and grown and grown. Last week at First Friday Mass, there was a record number of singers up there.
It sounded wonderful.
I
too.
drafted everyone who had ever sung in the choir to sing for that Mass. We have a new principal, so I wanted to let him hear what they could do. And we had 44 kids up there. That's quite a hefty number. They're delightful to work with. It's really exhilarating to be up there singing with them. Rehearsals are another story, but
that must present its own challenges.
it does. It's not easy for them to stay after school for rehearsal. Homework gets in the way, ability to get home, working parents.
In a way, it sort of meets with the gifts you bring to the table, because you have a background in education and have a degree in it, in fact, and the musical background come together, and you have this
And the
area
catechetical
emphasis.
background. Because when you're teaching music, the first thing I do with a hymn, English hymn, is with young children, you're starting with 3rd graders in a choir, isolate the difficult and truly Catholic vocabulary and make sure they have an understanding of what those words are. And then what is the text saying? So a choir rehearsal becomes very, very catechetical, and then we begin to sing it. And then they're singing with understanding. So that's everything.
Are they getting it?
Oh, they get it. Oh, they
Beautiful.
really do get it.
Do you think it helps the experience of singing at Mass, especially liturgical music? Does it help to bring them closer to God?
It helps not only with the children, but with the adults, because the preparation for an adult choir, for our adult choir, is to get a program a week ahead of time, and the references are made to the first reading, the psalm, the second reading, the gospel. They're summarized very quickly, and then the choir sees which hymns they'll be singing, and they understand why they're singing what they're singing, because it just illuminates the scriptural text. And we're just working off an ordinary missalette. Nothing really special.
Although anyone who knows what you do, who reads our bulletin and sees that section, Notes for the Loft,
Yes.
knows the amount of work that you put into preparing each week, not just checking off hymns, but to go deeper and deeper and deeper. How long have you been doing Notes for the Loft, and what are you accomplishing in that?
It's over 2 years. And the reason it started was we began to introduce more Latin into the liturgy, traditional Latin chants, Ave Maria, or the Magnificat, or Miserere Mei, or some beautiful polyphonic pieces. And there was a need to have a translation that people could refer to, not that very day, but in anticipation, so that when they came to Mass the next week, they would know what was coming.
And you draw on any and every resource, and the
Yes.
Fathers of the Church,
Yes.
quotations of the saints,
Liturgical documents.
all those things you pull together, and it's a rich education there. And
It is for me too.
and obviously for those who draw from its richness are truly helped and to deepen their own liturgical understanding. Now you've got the adult choir. You lead the music at the 12 noon Mass. You've added on the children's choir. Notes for the loft. And I know there's other challenges too, because being the multicultural and diverse parish, you've had to pull off multilingual liturgies as well. Any thoughts about that?
Oh, that was a lot of fun. I met the Corsillo group and introduced them to the Solite Mass, which was something composed in 3 languages, the Latin, English, and the Spanish. And we just had a lot of fun learning those Mass parts. They were amazed at how similar Spanish and Latin were, and got a thrill out of learning how to sing in Latin. And then, of course, with the adult choir, the English-speaking choir, they readily learned the Spanish parts, and they enjoyed that. So when I get the Spanish singers and the English-speaking singers together for a bilingual liturgy, it's an una voce choir, one voice. They're all singing together off the same sheet of music in 2 or 3 different languages. It's just beautiful.
It is beautiful, and thank you so much for what you do for that. And I wonder maybe to switch gears, because as I said at the outset of the show, it's not just liturgical music that you're involved in. You draw from other areas as well. And let me talk about another initiative that recently has sprung up here in Peekskill, because things keep happening here in Catholic Peekskill, is this idea of theology on tap. What is theology on tap?
Theology on Tap is a way of bringing the Church's message into the public square. So when it started, the ordinary place for it was the local bar. And I just happened to stop into the Peekskill Brewery on a Sunday recently to pick somebody up for the train, and the place was packed at 1, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, young people. So it is a place where there's an audience. There's an audience to hear what the Church has to say, and the setting's very relaxed. And
So how does it unfold? Is there everyone grabs a beer and talks theology, or is there a talk, or how does that go?
A talk is planned, and the setting is casual enough so that if people want to eat prior to the talk or be drinking or eating during the talk, I mean, they can do that. That was my experience, and it was very pleasant. People were very attentive, and it was enjoyable, very, very enjoyable.
I know the first one took place like in June, and then there was one in July.
Right.
And that was you. You delivered the talk.
Yes.
It was on the new feminism.
Yes.
I mean, of all the other things going on, tell us a little bit about the new feminism that Catholics can embrace.
There was a great interest in this topic, and I think it's because through painful experience, so many single parents realize, especially women, that the old feminism, it just wasn't, it didn't work. It just didn't work. So I think there was a curiosity, what is this new feminism? And some people were so surprised to hear that the popes were so much in touch with the problems that women have to face, but also just the nature of femininity. The talk was based mostly on then Cardinal Ratzinger, now Pope Benedict XVI's assessment of the writings of John Paul II.
Okay.
And it's much easier to understand Ratzinger / Pope Benedict XVI than it is Pope John Paul II.
Especially with a beer.
Oh, helps greatly.
And so how was the turnout when you had this? It was the Quiet Man.
It was the Quiet Man, and it was a beautiful night, so we had it outside.
In the back
In the
area?
back.
Oh, gorgeous.
Beautiful setting. The challenge was the lighting as the sun went down. So that, but you know, women are resourceful. So we got through that. There were about 60 people, 65 people there, clergy and lay people, married people. I found a lot of single parents in the audience that night.
Interesting.
Yes. And I think it came at a very good time because there had been some unpopular press for the Vatican and its treatment of women earlier in the summer, and the remarks that I made, I think, very clearly dispelled the myths that were out there.
Wonderful. Now, you used as a subtitle I saw on the flyer, "I am no man," a line from a character from J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. Where did that come from?
There's a scene in the movie where I'll call her a warrior princess, comes onto a battlefield and she has to protect someone who's mortally wounded, and this monster comes at her and hisses at her and says, you know, that no man can kill him, and she whips off the helmet and the blonde hair falls out and she goes, I am no man. It was just a great scene, and it inspired me to use that as the talk, the title for the talk, I am no man. And I think that's what women have to be saying to themselves primarily, and to the rest of the world. Hello, I am not a man. So don't ask me to play the role. I have something to offer, and it's unique.
So the
and
new
God-given.
feminism says not to try to compete with man in manliness, but to highlight the virtues or the strengths that are part of true femininity.
Right.
Wonderful. Now, I guess it's an easy transition from there to your involvement in pro-life work. Are you involved in the pro-life
Yes,
committee of
in the
Assumption?
Pro-Life Committee.
What does that pro-life committee do?
The Pro-Life Committee, I think, is it's reorganizing itself. It's very vibrant and has been sort of assessing different aspects of pro-life work. So there's the educational dimension that needs to be addressed, and the social outreach. There's I think primarily the component of prayer, because not everyone has the gifts or the time to be actively involved on the scene, but certainly to be a prayerful member of the committee and to encourage other people to pray for the more active members of the pro-life movement, and to be aware of the legislative and political dimensions of the pro-life movement.
Beautiful. I want to move on to yet another hat, if I could, if you let me, as I'm getting tired as I go through all this list. Not really, but to think how broad your work has been at Assumption Church, your ministry. This fall now, you're taking on a new initiative, which is RCIA for Teens. Now, I know our readers are aware RCIA stands for Rite of Christian Initiation for Adults, and that's the process by which non-Catholics or Catholics who are merely baptized, now adults, receive their communion confirmation or complete, or in some cases, I say, are baptized. But there's a special branch for kids in high school, Teen RCIA. You're taking that on as well. What's that going to be like?
I think I'm going to enjoy it. I've been out of the formal classroom setting for probably 3 years now, but I've still been busy educating. I enjoy teenagers. You don't start out in education enjoying teenagers because you're only maybe 3 years older than, you know, a high school senior. But at this point, I enjoy them tremendously. There's a hunger there, a curiosity. They want a reason to believe. And you have to be prepared to give them a rational basis for their faith.
One of the things we've discovered, certainly in a city like Peekskill, where young people have not been traditionally receiving the sacraments as they have as kids, baptism at 2-3 weeks old, First Communion at age 7 or 8, confirmation as they complete the course of required studies. Now it's happening, we have teenagers. So do you think you're going to have to start from ground zero, from scratch with a lot of these young people?
I will, and when I was at DRE in Queens, I worked with a population very similar to what we have here in Peekskill. And there was always a class where you were catching up with people. So that's where you start. You start right at the beginning. Why did God make you? You know, where are you going? Why are you here?
The old questions from the Baltimore Catechism.
Right from the basics, and then you move from there.
Well, I'm sure that I know that as soon as you had told me off camera that as soon as you found out that this was going to be one of the hats you wear, one of your ministries to do at Assumption, you began to pray for those students, and I'm sure they will feel those prayers.
Those students. And I think one of the things that I will really devote a lot of time to when I am working is just more than the academic, you know, to try and create in them persons of prayer. You know, I can't do that for them. I can't make the act of faith for them, and I cannot pray in their place. But just by presenting to them the person of Christ and how attractive he really is, and to pray for them, to hope to draw them into a life of prayer.
You can only, if you give the Lord Jesus to people, they will fall in love because he answers the deepest longings of our hearts. Now, I want to just maybe wrap up this section of Catholic Peekskill by asking, suppose someone is watching the show, they're maybe a parishioner, or even not a parishioner of Assumption, they've have some musical talents, they want to join the choir. What should they do?
Oh, I tell new people, come upstairs on a Sunday, especially if they've been attending the Mass, the 10 o'clock Mass, or the noon Mass, because I use the same music. Come on upstairs to a choir Mass, grab a missalette, and sing what you know. And listen to what you don't know. And learn. And we've picked up 2 or 3 really strong singers, maybe 4, thinking of a man right now. And I think you heard the difference this Sunday. I had everybody up there this Sunday, and it really sounded very, very good. So yes, I encourage people to come upstairs and just see what it's like up there.
Well, Donna Sticco, obviously you're doing a phenomenal job, just building with each passing month, and the years, now that you've been here 3 years, the difference is extraordinary. I know as pastor I'm exceedingly grateful to you. Thank you for all you do for a wonderful Catholic Peekskill.
Thank you for the opportunity.
My pleasure. Everyone, thank you so much for joining us. I want to share with you that you can please visit us at our website. It's www.assumptionpeekskill.org. There you'll find all kinds of information like our Mass schedule, which, just to let you know, it's Saturday evenings at 5 o'clock or 7 p.m. in Spanish, and then Sunday morning at 8, 10, and 12. And if you come to the 10 or 12, you'll certainly see Donna Sticco. Why don't you let her know that you saw her at Catholic Peekskill. My name is Father John Higgins. I hope you'll say hello to me as well. Please know that the priests at Assumption Church are very eager to serve you. If you have children to be baptized, we want you to bring them, because Jesus said, "Let the children come to me and do not hinder them." Catechetical classes, by which grades 1 through 8, if they're in those grades, or in high school, if they've not yet received baptism, communion, or confirmation, would like to be received in the Catholic Church, they'll have Miss Sticco as their teacher. Or also, as if you're an adult who are interested in finding out more about the Catholic faith. We are a full-service parish, there's no doubt about it, and we pride ourselves in our great desire to meet your needs. When you do come, I hope you come over, tap me on the shoulder, and say that you saw us on Catholic Peekskill, not just the website, but on the TV show as well. You can visit our blog, the address there you'll see on your screen. I hope you'll send us a message. My name is Father John Higgins. It's been a pleasure to be with you. God bless you, and this has been Catholic Peekskill.